Good morning, everyone. It is Friday, May 29th, 2020, and today, Carlisle Borough Council will conduct what I hope to be a series of special meetings to discuss potential small business recovery strategies. In addition to the borough taking an active role in a number of forums that have been created in response to COVID-19, Borough Council is taking steps to facilitate and assist with a variety of recovery efforts. Today's special meeting will focus on the borough's small business community. At the May 14th Borough Council meeting, my colleagues and I discussed potential strategies, including identifying ordinances and zoning rules that could potentially be lifted during a public health crisis and repurposing public space for local business activities temporarily. Other potential recovery strategies discussed included temporary street closures for pedestrian access, possible parking enforcement changes, and installation of hand washing facilities. Immediately following my remarks, we'll proceed with an overview of stimulus funds the borough anticipates receiving from the Federal CARES Act, followed by a report from staff on the conceptual strategies that have been submitted by elected officials, and then review additional suggestions received from business and property owners. Following that, we'll have closing remarks and then another round of public comment. For housekeeping, this morning's meeting is set up as a webinar. Members of council and staff are panelists, with everyone else in attendee mode to begin. The meeting is formatted in this way to keep things running smoothly. If you would like to comment at any time during this meeting, you have several options. You can click on the hand raise option. That will indicate to the meeting host that you'd like to speak. You will then be switched to panelists and have the ability to talk, share your screen, etc. Second, you can submit comments through the chat function. Comments written in the chat window are visible to hosts, panelists, and attendees. Third, you can ask questions through the Q&A option. The meeting host will be monitoring both the chat window and the Q&A box during today's meeting. And as a reminder, when not speaking, please, panelists, mute your microphones to cut down on background noise. And all guests, please make sure you give your name and address before you speak for the record, as this is a public meeting and it's required. And with that, I would like to turn things over to Deputy Mayor Deputy Mayor Sean Schultz and Borough Manager Susan Armstrong to talk about the CARES Act and stimulus funds.
Susan, you almost got demoted there.
I know.
But thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I want to thank all of those who are attending and all those out there who have struggled through this the last 2 months to mitigate the spread of COVID-19. I know, especially for business owners, the struggle has been real. Many of you, while trying to maintain businesses, are also dealing with trying to homeschool children and perhaps dealing with spouses and loved ones who are out of work. So appreciate everybody for doing what you can do under these circumstances. Now, from day one, we on council and staff through the borough manager have sought ways to, once the opportunity is ripe, to assist local businesses. And the CARES Act came through for us, albeit somewhat slower than we would have hoped. Those funds are now getting ready to trickle down our way. We will have at least $150,000 from the CARES Act funds to support local businesses and other entities. So I got muted at some point there, I guess. I'm not sure when. So let me go back.
Only missed a second or two.
Okay, good, thanks. So the current status of that program is we have a draft plan that we must submit to HUD because it's under the Community Development Block Grant program. So we need HUD approval on our plan. That plan is projected to be submitted to HUD on this coming Wednesday. We will then, because there is under the CARES Act a more limited comment period of 5 days rather than 30 days, we will be able to go to the comment period on the Monday following, so 2 Mondays from now. It will be, the program is intended to be in the form of grants or forgivable loans to local businesses to help you all get through the recovery to the extent we can assist that, and further supplement any federal and state programs that you've been able to take part in. So with that, I will hand it off to Borough Manager Susan Armstrong for some further details and additional background.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Schultz. I think you summarized it well. Just one clarification: the program itself will not get submitted to HUD for their approval until after the public comment period. So we anticipate that if everything gets rolled out correctly, as we have it outlined right now, that it could be submitted to HUD no later than by June 15th. And so we also understand from HUD that the CARES Act, the stimulus dollars, are of the highest priority for them, and that while they have, I think, between approximately 45 minutes or 45 days to turn around their approval or disapproval of our plan, they have really shortened that window because of this is such a high priority. And so what we will do is, once the plan is outlined and ready for public comment, as you stated, it's 5 days. We will post it on our website, and we will actually promote it through our social media as well. Again, the window for public comment is very short. It's 5 days, and that was designed purposely by HUD in order, again, to get the monies out to the communities quickly. So with that being said, I think we'll wait until next Wednesday and do our best to get the outline disseminated to the elected officials expeditiously.
All right, thank you very much, Susan. I believe we already have a question from the audience. Stephanie, would you like to read that question?
I just added Linda to the meeting. She was the one who was raising her hand, so she wants to ask her question.
Oh, I just couldn't hear you. So I didn't know what I was doing wrong here, but actually you weren't, you were still muted, in other words. So
okay, so you're all good?
What about the question for now?
Okay.
All right, glad we were able to clear that up. Welcome, Linda. Next, we'll go on to the conceptual strategies that were received, and we have our Deputy Borough Manager Owen Snyder, who will go over this list.
Good morning. So the community and council and staff really did a nice job of having some strategies put together to see how we can facilitate or help adjust the borough operations in this new world of COVID-19 and then during the recovery phase of COVID-19. There's a number of varied concepts we're evaluating. Some of the things that we're considering and have started to look at are how can we make adjustments and have more outdoor dining in the borough? What impact does that have to parking, and what adjustments may need made to parking to allow for that to operate easier in the borough? Also looking at our streets and our alleys, keeping in mind that we do have some state roads in the borough that have a little bit different process, but what borough streets and alleys can we possibly open or close or adjust how we use those streets to facilitate more of the business operation within the social distancing guidelines and other rules and things that have been set up during this period. We also took a look at the parks and how we can maybe use our parks a different way to allow for businesses to operate. That's something we're considering. And with all this, it obviously is a change in our borough and our downtown if we would go down any of these paths. So we also need to consider other items like sanitation and hygiene and how what changes need made to the borough to make sure that those things are in place to permit and make for a safe environment in this new world as well. We're also looking at zoning and also with public spaces. How can we better use our public spaces to, again, promote recovery and assist with our businesses and giving them an environment to be able to operate in the new world of social distancing and additional hygiene procedures. And we continue to evaluate this and look forward to digging more into these items and researching in more detail as we move forward.
And if I may add, Mayor, I think one of the with the recent change with respect to restaurants and bars, and the recent change with the governor under the yellow phase that outdoor dining accommodations are now permissible and with certain precautionary measures put in place. Staff understands that, there are a number of restaurants that are relying heavily upon trying to accommodate their customers and attract their customers back. So that's probably one of the areas that we feel is a high priority. And I think, in discussions with you and others on council, we recognize that that's probably one of the areas that we may want to focus on is, the sidewalk ordinance itself and looking at some of those public spaces. But here again, that was one of the purposes of today's meeting is what makes sense for the small businesses downtown.
Yeah, Susan, thank you for bringing that up. It's definitely something that staff and I believe council would agree to prioritize with the outdoor dining being allowed as of June 5th. If we could somehow get our policies in place so the businesses don't have to wait too long to see what they can do either under our ordinances or under the governor's guidelines. So thank you for that. But as Susan said, this meeting is about input from the public, property owners, business owners, Carlisle residents in general. So we will now take any additional suggestions that folks might have that are on the call. So please share your thoughts. You can do so in the chat room, as I said, or you can send us, you can raise your hand in the Zoom webinar. And I see we already have a business owner that would like to ask a question or make a comment. Laura Portillo.
Hello, everybody. I'm here with Ross, and thank you for holding this public meeting. We have discussed, there are other implications for restaurants. For example, our two restaurants have no parking. So you're looking at only maybe 2 tables in front of. But the other implication we have with Cafe Bruges is the liquor license. So if we're gonna take it further from the sidewalk, the LCBs won't allow us to serve alcohol anywhere else. So we would have to address that because that is a big percentage of the profits for any restaurant that has a liquor license. And then our patrons going to be able to come into the restaurant to use the facilities, or are we allowed to use china and silverware? Do we have to go to old disposables? There's just a lot.
We're in uncharted territory here.
But the most important one is it's who is dealing with the LCB that would allow us to take alcohol outside of the restaurant.
Those are very good questions, Laura. Thank you, Laura and Ross. Thank you for bringing those up. Some of the stuff we'd have to check with other agencies, but I think between our staff, the chamber staff, DCA, and whatever state agencies, we can get answers to those questions for you.
Thank you.
We'll make sure we get back to you. Thank you for the question, folks. And I believe we have a question here. I see it in the chat. It's from Ms. Wanda Hunter. Good morning, Ms. Wanda. And she asked the question, is there a plan for CDBG funds to get to the pockets of the population defined by DOH's Health Equity Response Team as vulnerable in the form of testing, assistance returning to work, or retraining for pandemic-specific occupations, i.e. contact tracing?
Yeah.
Wanda, that's a very good question. Susan, do you have a response?
I do, and I appreciate that the question was posed because we were remiss in touching on. So the Borough of Carlisle, because we are a HUD entitlement community, we are going to be the recipient of a pot of stimulus dollars. In addition to the Borough of Carlisle receiving CARES stimulus dollars, so is the county. The county is going to receive about $750,000. And I've been privy to some of those discussions, but I don't know if they have a total outline as far as how much is going to be earmarked for the nonprofit community. And there's applications that they have put out on the street to the community, your United Way and other nonprofits to submit requests. And I think their application's already been put on the street, I think earlier this week, if I recall correctly. And so again, I think there's also, as you're aware, we have our annual allotment of community development block grant monies. There will be a budget prepared for the annual allotment. This year, we're proposed to get approximately $373,000. And we've done a very good job through the years with that. Everything from shop steading loans that are designed to for every $35,000 that a shop borrows, one full-time equivalent position is created for a low to moderate income individual. We earmark dollars for other needs, Memorial Park, Hope Station, Employment Skills Center, etc. So what I'd like to suggest is, again, we have the CARES dollars that we want to get out on the street quickly, and then we're going to phase into what are we going to do with our annual allotment of CDBG. And then we also have later in the year, probably reprogramming some unexpended monies from prior community development block grant years. So I think we're looking at this in phases, and we certainly do. We don't want to duplicate efforts. That's one of the things that we've, as you alluded to, Mayor, in our forums that we're participating, that's key, is not to duplicate efforts and make sure that the monies are going to fill certain gaps.
Can I just chime in and just say that since you already brought up the Employment Skills Center, I think that I always like to have guidance from folks that do things very specific to what the question was asking. And part of it was about returning to work or retraining for specific occupations. So trying to see, what those folks have as a guiding recommendations or areas that would be helpful. So maybe following up with some of the nonprofits that fill these gaps and understanding where the monies would best be spent, if possible, rather than us just on our own trying to figure that out.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you very much, folks. We'll pivot also now to Chad Kimmel from Grand Illusion, and he has a comment. He says, I would really benefit from being able to use 2 parking spaces in front of my business for extra space for seating. That's something that's on the table, Chad, and we'll get back to you on that, but that is definitely something that's in the mix. And the previous question was actually from Tawanda Hunter, not Wanda Hunter, so I want to get that on there for the record. Chris Petsinis friend of ours, owner of North Hanover Grill, would like to know, or has a question: does the open container law conflict with customers consuming alcohol as takeout? Any thoughts on that?
Mr. Mayor, just to jump in on this one, I'm not sure if it would conflict with the takeout, but based on the comments, I think part of our discussion should be the potential of waiving the open container law, maybe for the entire summer, or do it a month at a time. But I think based on the takeout and outdoor seating, and to the question that came up a few moments ago, I think that seems to make sense if we could waive that, and have, open container being similar to when we have outdoor festivals or things like that. I think that would make it cleaner for our businesses.
Thank you very much. And Chris also had a follow-up question about liquor as takeout. I believe the governor has addressed that in his guidelines, that you can now take out up to 64 ounces of liquor to go. So I think that's already been addressed. Next, we have a question from Mark Farrell at Hook and Flask. And Mark, go ahead. You're unmuted. Mark, you're unmuted. Still there? Okay. I'm sure he'll be back. So
Mark might also be the phone number on there. I'm not sure. I know he had an issue where he had to attend and have his phone for audio in the past.
Oh, okay. I see that now. He is on the phone. Okay. Mark, are you with us?
I tried.
Okay. No, we did. Let the record show. We did try. Okay, he's going to call in. All right. We have a question from Karen Griffith, and she says, from a zoning standpoint, anything that streamlines the process for requesting signage or latitude around signage would be helpful. The situation changes so quickly at present. Also, more prominent signage, if possible, on a temporary basis, and not just inside the window as is currently preferred. Thank you for that comment. We will certainly add that to our discussion, Karen.
And I'll just add to that. I mean, obviously, I'm sure she's in agreement of this. I'm in agreement of larger signage or something that that amplifies our businesses, but ensuring that it doesn't encroach on the right of way on the sidewalk. So, we're going to be doing this with the seating as well, of just ensuring that there's space for seating, but also space for people to walk. And so, when it comes to any of these things, of like a happy balance.
Okay. Thank you. And Chris Bassinis, to clarify, and this is my fault, I apologize. He says the takeout, as in for customers to buy and take out food to consume at the outdoor seating. This may solve licensing from the LCB for expanding outdoor seating. So once again, Chris, we're going to have to consult with attorneys on this one, and I'm hoping the LCB will be flexible with these situations as they come up. So more on that. We'll get back to you. Mark.
Yeah, this is Mark. Sorry about that.
No problem.
My work PC, my day work PC does not like Zoom for some reason. So I had you guys know that I've supported the request to extend the sidewalk seating and also lift the open container. And I just wanted to share that I sat in on a call yesterday with the Pennsylvania Restaurant and Lodging Association, where they shared that they are working with PLCB to, by Wednesday or Thursday of next week, have a form for businesses to extend their outside seating in a very easy and quick capacity to meet along with boroughs and so forth that allow us to extend that. So I know there was a question that came up about how we can do that with the PLCB, and they're saying that by Wednesday or Thursday of next week, if you guys allow extended sidewalk seating, that we will be able to make that application to the PLCB and get an automatic approval to use, whether it's parking spaces or additional outside sidewalk. I've already asked one of my two neighbors about doing that in case you guys pass that, to allow you know, for me, I have businesses on either side that are not open in the night and weekends when we're busy. So that's where I'm hoping either that, or as Chad had mentioned, perhaps using some parking spaces out in front to allow additional outside seating and extended social distancing, I guess, for patrons. But I think those two things are important. I've also reached out to my insurance company, who told me that I can share the addresses of those additional spaces to allow my insurance to extend to cover that. So I've tried to look at all those different areas there, and it seems like if you guys are willing to allow that extension, that it's going to be doable for us in a relatively easy fashion to do that.
Easy is always good. Thank you for that, Mark. We appreciate it. And we have a question from Ashley Corby at Market Cross, and she wants clarification on how much space is required currently for passageway on the sidewalk around the seating. Who wants to take that one?
Mayor, I think that.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Susan.
I was actually just going to look it up. If you know it offhand, that's great, Jeff.
According to the guideline, you still need to keep 6 feet social distancing if you have sidewalk seating for pedestrians to walk along there. So you still need that 6 foot distancing between tables and people walking the sidewalk.
Okay. And Susan, how does that marry up with our current regulations under our sidewalk ordinance?
I'll have to double check the sidewalk ordinance. I believe that it's not 6 feet in our sidewalk ordinance.
Okay.
Let me just query that quickly.
Okay. While you do that, I was remiss in recognizing Pam Fleck, who had a question. If parking is kept free, I would recommend keeping it free after 11 a.m. until 3 p.m. The offices in our block use spaces when they're free, and I think a time restriction would keep the office people from filling up the spots. Thank you for that question. Thank you for that comment, Pam. We appreciate it.
I have one quick follow-up on that about the seating, about using parking spaces on High and Hanover because they're state roads. I thought that PennDOT had, I mean, in past, I thought they had been frowning upon parklets, and that's why we didn't move forward when the DCA was interested in that a number of years ago. But have we heard that there's an easier process to get that, or is that under the borough's purview? I'm actually not sure. Because that would help with, because of our sidewalk sizing and the social distancing space required. I think that's why we're having this conversation, obviously, because we need to have additional spaces to make sure that everyone is safe. But I'm unsure of the PennDOT part of the equation.
I wonder if PennDOT would allow us to use the parking spaces as a walkway rather than as a seating area, so that to help keep that 6 feet of distance between passersby and people who are sitting at a table, because I know they had objected to us using it as restaurant seating, but perhaps there's a way to get around that a little bit.
I believe we have both Mark Malrich and Mark. Are you able to answer that? You or Rick Frieden?
Well, I could interject on what PennDOT indicated the last time we met with them regarding the dining decks. The borough controls the use of the street from the standpoint of parking, and if we would use that for a walkway, that was something that they would consider. However, we would need to put a barrier up that would protect the walker from vehicles driving by, some type of conspicuous barrier, such as a large planter or a Jersey barrier type of arrangement.
I have a follow-up question for Mark. So I know there's various rules for dealing with the state roads for purposes for traffic, but in terms of requesting a speed limit change, or is it all sort of the same process and timelines for changing the purpose of the road, but also changing the speed limit? Is it all pretty much the same process?
Well, the process is we would go to PennDOT and discuss with them whatever the proposal is. They do have regulations regarding speed limits. For the use of the parking area, we're not changing the use of the roadway, so the roadway will continue to function in its current arrangement. It's just that we would lose parking, and we would have to provide for safe passage of pedestrians and provide for ADA access. So if you're leaving from the sidewalk onto the street and using the street as a temporary sidewalk area, you would need to have appropriate ADA ramps.
Yeah, so you can kind of see where I was going. If we're going to move things closer to, sorry, that's somebody coming down the road here. If we're going to extend service a little closer to where the actual traffic is, it may be worth looking at speed limit changes as well.
And I'll just note that, you know, a Jersey barrier I don't think is cheap. And so having something that is safe and gives a barrier is another thing that is a logistical challenge. So this is where I think creative partnerships in our community could come in. So as we're talking about this, there are things that the borough would have to supply, and, you know, everything costs money. But if there's, you know, if we have creative partnerships that we could find ways that we could find something that would give that safety measure in a creative and low cost, cheap, free way, you know, it's one more thing that we don't have to put money into an area that's just concrete, and ideally, you know, back into businesses. So just some things like that to put out to the public, thinking creatively. We can all kind of work together if anyone has resources. So if we are able to do this.
Thank you very much. Anything more on that?
Mayor,
Yes.
I did find the unobstructed passageway currently in our ordinance for sidewalk cafes is 4 feet. So following up on what Chief Snyder indicated, that you would need a 6-foot span in order to practice social distancing. There you get to see the conflict between our current ordinance and the guidelines for social distancing. So again, the reason we're having these conversations, where does it make sense if we do decide to utilize some of the parking spaces for, you know, pedestrian traffic? Again, what's the residual impact of that? Do the businesses prefer to have the open cafes, or is it more, do they value the parking more? So as Councilor Landis indicated, it's all about balance. So.
Right. Borough Manager Armstrong is exactly right. It's going to be, we need to hear from businesses. And again, what do you value? Do you want the space on the sidewalk, or do you want to have the parking? You let us know. And again, it's about a balance. Now, I've got some other questions here, and I'm trying to get to everything. But if I don't, for some reason, you can always email your questions or your comments, and we will make sure that they are seen by all of council and staff. Becky Richardson, are you considering a designated outdoor public space, beer or wine garden, where people can bring drinks they purchase from downtown establishments, perhaps Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturday nights? Does anyone have a response to that?
I think that as with respect to staff, we're more than open to that, to explore whether that's one of our public parking lots that would be utilized in that manner. You know, I think we have Stacy Hamilton on here, who is our parking supervisor. She's brought forward several suggestions with respect to different areas of parking lots that could be utilized. Possibly the one that seems of great interest to staff, but here again, we would want to hear from the businesses is behind the North Hanover Grill. Does it make sense that a portion of the East Lowther Street South parking lot be utilized for potentially such a use, so.
Okay. Stephanie Gilbert, if you're talking about taking parking spaces and or parking areas or closing streets, what will be your strategies for making up those parking spaces? We have issues with parking downtown in many areas and issues with traffic. So how will you ensure that these new uses won't create a new and different problem for downtown? Again, Stephanie, that's going to be up to the businesses. I mean, if you value the parking more, and it sounds like you do, then we'll take that into consideration and try to create some kind of a balance.
Yeah.
But as far as specifics on a lot of things, we're just not quite there yet, but we will be.
Yeah.
And Mr. Mayor, just to follow up on that point, and to Stephanie's point, if there is a offshoot street or a portion of a street off of Higher Hanover that the businesses think would make sense to set up kind of that common area that was brought up before, where folks can get curbside to go from one of the restaurants and then walk to that area and sit at tables that are 6 feet apart. I think that's something we should explore, but also, to Stephanie's point, make sure we're not taking too many parking spots, because we also don't want to create a scenario where there's parking. I think someone brought this up, where there's parking and then there's a spot or two where people are being directed out into the street. There could be some safety issues with that.
And again, staff has looked at several scenarios. How can we make the Pomfret Street parking garage more attractive and entice people to park there and walk a block to a business. So Stacy brought forward several suggestions with how do we entice people to not consume the prime parking spaces downtown, allow those easy access for people to patronize the businesses, get the takeouts in and out. And again, as you stated, Mayor Scott, we're taking a look at it. And I think that we'll be in a position to provide additional information and recommendations for the next public meeting that you want to have on that particular issue.
I'll just make one more comment. I think we see it happen when there is an event, the Farmers on the Square even, you can't get prime parking right in front of Farmers on the Square, but people still come, and they come because it's a vibrant and lively and a good place to come and get your food and support our local businesses. So although we see it more amplified on just a one-off basis of an event, I think that if you build that culture of a corridor where people can come together and, we're all social distancing, and there is this craving of being with people again, even if we're a little bit farther apart. So I think, thinking about that, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about supporting the businesses, but I think the culture and this feeling of being together but apart can happen in a safe way. And I think, I would just say that although there are parking issues, we do see that people are willing to walk when there is that place that they really, that vibrant and interesting and comfortable place to go to. So just like the Farmers on the Square, we see it every week. So that's just me.
Just sorry, Mr. Mayor, just out of curiosity, while there's this discussion on parking spaces in front of businesses being used for seating, since there seems to be some discrepancy in some businesses wanting that, others wanting it to remain parking, would we be able to allow businesses to make that decision? So, for example, if a business has 2 spots in front of their establishment, allowing them to make the decision as to whether they would want to use that space for seating or, have it remain parking, as opposed to making that all of one or all of the other, since there does seem to be some discrepancy in what businesses want here.
Thank you for that question, Jeff. And again, I'll just say it's all about balance. And if business has a plan that they think is workable, we can certainly take a look at it. Again, there's more than one ways to skin this cat, so I'm open to anything, and I think staff is, and I believe my colleagues are too. So,
And
hopefully
I
that helps.
had a question for staff and for the group. I see it coming up in some of the questions, and just throwing this out as a hypothetical, but if every Friday night we closed part of High Street from Hanover to Pitt, this is just for the group, for the business owners, and also for staff. I mean, when we do that for events, what are we looking at staff-wise? You know, does there have to be staff there? Is that a big financial hit? And then also to the businesses, is that something, you know, that's a benefit? It would obviously take away all the parking in that area, but could be like an outdoor festival type scenario.
Okay, thank you, Sean. Two more questions, and then we have someone that would like to speak. First is from Stephanie Gilbert, and she wants to know what streets are being discussed for possible closing and how. Again, Stephanie, we're just preliminarily looking at these types of things. Off the top of my head, I know that we've looked at perhaps the first or second block, first block of North Pitt, first block of South Pitt, and possibly some alleys in that area. But again, this is all just in preliminary discussion. Does anyone have anything they want to add on that?
Yeah, I'd say we want to make sure it's coordinated with business needs, and to jump maybe ahead to tie this and another comment I'm seeing together, that Chris Patsinis asked about the limitation on restaurants under yellow and green. If we can provide those outdoor spaces in appropriate places on streets or in parking lots, while of course maintaining the need for parking, I wonder if that sort of helps the public spaces sort of help restaurants get beyond that limitation, right? There's a limitation for restaurants for their own indoor and outdoor seating, but if we're opening up public spaces for people to take their food and go dine elsewhere, that sort of expands overall restaurant capacity.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I have a comment and a request. It might be useful, if it's possible, to have perhaps the DCA or the chamber have a short set of questions that as many businesses could ask that respond to the question of what their preferences would be. You know, do you have a public space outside? Would you prefer it to be used for parking? And just collect as many of those as we can. And what we may find is there's some arranging that makes sense where certain blocks seem to have similar views. So it would, moving forward, it would help me a lot if we could get one of our business groups to maybe put together a short survey that would answer some of these specific questions.
Mr. Hicks, as our liaison to DCA, it sounds like you're volunteering to do that.
I'm certainly gonna, yeah, thanks, Glenn. I see it popping up. I think he understands what would be useful, so thanks.
All right, thank you very much. Ashley Corby has a question regarding outdoor seating. She says, do all outdoor seating decor need to be brought inside at the end of the night? Can guests stand outside in our roped off space, or do they have to be seated like the current ordinance states? For the answer to your second question about standing in roped off areas, I know that right now under our ordinance, they do have to be seated. That is something that we do, and it's not necessarily an LCB thing. At least I don't think so. So that's definitely something that can be looked at. And as far as the outdoor seating and decor being taken inside, I don't know if we're going to legislate that, but it's probably a good idea, unless anybody else has any thoughts on that.
Mayor, may I address the, under the yellow phase for outdoor dining, customers must be seated.
Okay. All right. Well, that answers that question. Okay. And now we have Linda Jackman who has a question. Linda, your mic is unmuted. Please state your question or comment.
Thank you, and good morning. Appreciate you having these question and answer periods. I have a a restaurant on Pomfret Street. It's a tea room, and we have a large patio out back, which we will be opening up this coming Friday and Saturday of next week for outdoor seating. I guess my questions specifically, I have a couple of them. Where there is a right-of-way access between, zero lot lines there. There's a right-of-way access alleyway between my building and a building next door to me. And I was wondering what the zoning is with regards to our customers using that as a access to and from the patio in the back. Would I have to get permission? I don't think it belongs to my building. I think it's to Pat Craig next door. Do we have to get permission from the neighbor to use that alleyway, or is it in my right to access that for my customers? So that's one question. Also, there are West Chapel Avenue is behind the tea room, and there's a large parking lot or two owned by the borough. And I was wondering if we could use that for customers coming to the patio. They can access it from West Chapel as well as from Pomfret Street. And if the borough would consider opening up those empty spaces, especially on the weekends when you folks aren't working, whether we could somehow use those parking spaces, some of them anyway, for parking for our customers. I also have a lot of questions with regard to, and I'm not sure if you can answer these or not, or if you can lead me in the right direction. Exactly what is this going to look like whenever I open my patio? I mean, are my tables, of course, have to be 6 feet apart? Will it only be family members allowed to sit at one grouping? Can there be, a mixed friends and family coming in? I have all of these questions. Do I have to go to disposable plates and silverware? Because right now we use real silver and we can't bleach it in order for it to be sterilized. So all of those questions are coming up right now, and I'm not sure exactly what this is going to look like in my head. The other question I have is about staffing. Do I have to take everybody's temperature before work begins that day? So, in addition to the right-of-way access and the parking, there are just the nitty-gritty questions that are haunting me, like how is this going to look on the day-to-day operations with staff and customers coming in? So I don't know if there's any guidelines or anything you can refer me to, or anybody that has any inside information. We would appreciate that.
Absolutely, Linda. Thank you. And I'd say about 90% of your questions, there's folks here jumping on saying they would love to engage with you on that. The DCA and the Chamber have tremendous resources to help guide you. As a matter of fact, last week they put out a guide to reopening your business. I don't know if you got that email, but I believe it is on their website, or you can contact Michelle Crowley at the Chamber or Glenn White at the DCA, and they'd be more than happy to help you.
Okay. I did not receive that. So.
Okay, well, and even more reason for them to reach out to you. So
thank you.
I'm sure they will.
Mayor, this is Chief. I'm sorry, sir.
Oh, no, go ahead, Chief.
I emailed some guidance to Michelle, which just was released on the 27th, dealing with restaurants opening up in the yellow phase and the green phase, which would address some of the issues on seating, the number of people can be seated, the methods, 2 methods that the governor recommends to identify the amount of seating based on occupancy or square footage of the area, and who can sit at the tables, and what is required for employees. So Michelle has that latest information that I'm sure she'll be sharing.
Absolutely. And Lynn, you can always go to www.carlislechamber.org to get the latest updates. Let's,
Mayor Scott,
yes.
excuse me, Stacy, parking supervisor. Ms. Jackman,
Yes.
in response to your parking questions, please keep in mind the Pomfret Street parking garage located directly across from your business is open free of charge on the weekends as well. So your customers are welcome to park in the garage.
Yes, we thank you for that. We have alerted our customers about that free parking on the weekends. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Thank you very much. And Michelle Crowley, you're unmuted. If you had some comments you'd like to make before I move on to the next question.
I just wanted to add Chief Snyder's document that he forwarded to me. We did send to Lynn this morning. So Lynn, check your inbox. Plus there's also a link to our website that we're doing jointly with the DCA. The Chamber is doing jointly with the DCA. Under the section called Open and Together, there's a lot of the documentation necessary for each each business category. There's one very specifically earmarked to restaurants that has CDC guidelines for restaurants. The new guidelines that Chief Snyder was talking about, if they're not there already, they're being added. So there's a lot of information right there for you to utilize that's not going to answer all of your specific questions about paper versus China. And Lynn, I've been to your place several times and I realized the charm of doing things with the silverware and the plates. That's half the fun of it. But I think the limitation when it comes, and you all can correct me if I'm wrong, the limitation in regard to who's allowed to sit at a table, whether it's a family member or a friend, I think a lot of that falls back to the comfort level of your guests. As long as you're providing them, you're adhering to the guidelines the borough's laid out with the social distancing and everything else within that group. I know when golf courses reopened 3 weeks ago, individuals were told that they needed to have separate carts unless they wanted to ride with the person that they felt comfortable sharing with. I haven't looked at it in the restaurant guidelines, but I would assume it's almost the same thing. So if you're comfortable eating next to someone, then it should be okay, I would assume. But we'll kind of look into that a little further.
Thank you, Michelle. And I don't know if you have my correct maybe email address. It's we changed it, but you might want to make note of it. It's tparlor@PA, like PennsylvaniaPA.net. We had a CenturyLink, but we recently changed our email. So maybe that was why we didn't get the information until this morning.
Okay. Thank you, Lynn. And Jay Abaum had to jump off, but he had a question regarding downtown parking enforcement and when will it resume? Susan, do you want to take that one, or Stacy?
Certainly. Well, Stacy, you feel free to join in. We've been discussing that. We've been monitoring it closely. I think, again, one of the variables is what occurs when the county employees come back full staff at the courthouses. And we know that they consume parking spaces. So, and I want to hand it over to Stacy because she had some unique ideas on how we could balance everything. And why don't we just float that, Stacy, with respect to enforcement of the silver meters, but where we could do some free offerings.
Sure. Thank you, Susan. One of the things that I did mention was when county does come back full force, if you will, is to really kind of monitor or enforce the 2-hour section of town by doing what we call electronic tire chalking. And what that would mean is, if we have a vehicle that is parked in a 2-hour, in the 2-hour time zone at the silver meters, the enforcement officer would take a picture of the valve on the tire, and in 2 hours. The handheld device would give the enforcement officer an alert, and the enforcement officer would then go back to that vehicle And if the valve stem has not moved, that's an indication then that that vehicle has been there for at least 2 hours. And then we would issue a ticket to that vehicle. So we were going to kind of maybe use Kirk Stoner's help a little bit here and, you know, ask him to put the word out to county employees, because it's kind of a given that, you know, county folks do park at the prime parking spaces at the 2 hours, and ask county employees, hey, we need to help out our downtown businesses here, and we want those people to park at the gold meters or utilize our parking garage, and let those 2 hour meters for people who are visiting downtown and are going into our shops and our restaurants. What I had proposed to the borough manager's office and had listed the ideas for council is to the meters in our parking lots and the garage to remain free, and not enforce the gold meters, which is our long-term meters. So that, again, those county folks that don't have leased spaces could park at gold meters and not worry about feeding them necessarily, as well as park in the garage and not worry about paying for the garage. So that was kind of a way to, again, get the county folks out of that short-term area and give the opportunity for visitors to come into downtown and you get that turnover.
Right.
Since
Brenda?
we're talking about the county as well. So two things. One, I saw on the Facebook comments really quickly. This is again about creative public-private partnerships. Someone noted, you know, can we work with some of the churches to use their parking lots when they aren't being used actively? So I think that there is additional parking, but it's private, and so I'm just trying to see if we can reach out to some of the spaces that maybe we don't have the access, or to say you can park there, but I think everyone's sort of working together in that capacity. And the other, we were talking about the county, the other spaces that we as the borough don't have access to float as possibilities, and that's the square. So I think that that's a beautiful, vibrant, well-maintained space that I would love to see more options used for, you know, allowing our businesses possibly to use that space as well. But again, that's not ours as the borough. So just, you know, as we're working with the county, that would be an ideal location, I think. It's already a pedestrian plaza. It would just be, you know, and the market uses it one day a week on the outskirts, but not in the internal space. So.
All right, thank you, Brenda. We are approaching the 1 hour mark, and I had an old boss in Harrisburg that insisted if you had anything for more than an hour, you weren't talking about anything. So we've got two folks that had their hands raised and they were waiting very patiently. So we'll take their questions, and then unless there's anything else, we'll go ahead and wrap it up. First up, Laura Portillo, your mic is unmuted.
I just wanted to share that the Pennsylvania Restaurant and Lodging Association will have a 1 p.m. webinar. It is for our food service people. And there seems to be a lot of, we all have a lot of questions. So I could share that email maybe with the DCA and Michelle, and they can go out, because not everybody belongs to it, but we do. But I think that's gonna answer a lot of our questions for us in the food service.
And also, Laura, if you get any good information, please share that with our staff too. We'd love to get that, help you get the word out as well.
Absolutely.
All right. Sarah Taby, thank you for waiting patiently. You're unmuted.
She's not unmuted.
Oh.
Am I unmuted?
You are unmuted.
Hi, I'm a little confused about the CARES Act, I think. So the borough received $150,000 and we're having conversations about what to do with that money. Am I right so far?
You are absolutely correct.
Well, we haven't received the monies yet.
Okay.
Right, but we'll be able to make them available. In fact, one of the things that we ran by HUD was using general fund money to front grants while it takes some time to get the funds through HUD. So we'll be able to get that out a little more quickly than we normally would. But go ahead.
Yeah, so that's the part that I'm confused about. I don't know whether we're having conversations about how the borough should spend the money, or if we're having conversations about how businesses can access the money. Because as a business, we've already been waiting weeks and weeks for the government to come through with loans and for just aid to come in. And now we're sitting here in conversations and not talking about how money gets to the businesses. And the more conversations we have, the more we're just bleeding money. So I think we need to figure out how the businesses access the money. And we can talk about parking, great, but like we're still not having a conversation about how we access the money.
Yeah, so that one of the things we had to wait for was guidance on HUD on what we could do with the programs under CDBG, and that came out very recently. And so Chris Rafferty at the Redevelopment Authority has been working closely with Susan Armstrong to pull together a plan, and that's what we talked about earlier on in the meeting, and will be in a roughly finalized form on Wednesday. Shortly after that, we'll be having a comment period, unveiling that plan, having a comment period, and that's going to be within the next couple of weeks. So we'll be able to dive into more detail on that at that time.
So maybe in 2 months.
I said two weeks. I said.
No, but I just mean like that's when the comment period will happen.
No, the comment period will happen within the next 2 weeks.
And then after the comment period, then you'll go back and rewrite it in some way. Or so what I'm saying is, business can expect to apply for this money probably in about 6 to 8 weeks.
No, I don't. Well, I'll pass that on to Susan, but I don't think we're not looking at a timeline that's going to be anywhere near that long. But go ahead,
I'm not
Susan,
trying to be like, I appreciate everyone's work, but I feel like this is the second time I sat through an hour-long meeting where we talked about parking in 6 feet of space in front of restaurants. And I'm still not understanding how we access the money.
Susan, you want to go ahead and?
Certainly. Yes, Sarah, thank you for the question, and our apologies that we empathize with you. We certainly do. And that's why one of the thoughts is, instead of us sitting here and waiting for HUD to, HUD's check to come in, are we going to have the ability where we, in order to get the money out on the street quicker, or can we use general fund dollars in the interim and then repay the general fund once HUD releases those dollars to the borough? I do, again, think that you're going to see a relatively quick turnaround with respect to, you may ask, why can't we just go ahead and put a loan application out on the street now and write some checks from general fund? We're not in that position to do so yet. And the reason why is we're still waiting on some of the final criteria to come down from HUD. However, in the interim, what we can do, we can give them an outline of what the budget looks like, of the monies that we're going to bring in. They want a general description of what the uses are going to be for those monies. And once we submit that to them, hopefully, like we said, the week of June 15th, we've been told several times that this is a priority for HUD, and that while they have 45 days to turn it around, they hope to turn those things around much sooner than that. As soon as we receive their initial approval, that is when the borough would be at a position to put applications on the street. And we've been in consultation with Katie, who we hope to partner with respect to how underwriting those, whether it's grants and or forgivable loans. So again, we appreciate your patience, but we certainly understand.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and Sarah, please don't get discouraged by your experiences with other agencies. We're trying very hard here to use separate funds that we've been allocated to get this money out on the street as quickly as possible.
I
but
understand.
no, yeah,
We're all frustrated.
yeah. I know you are, my friend. I know. Yeah, you should be. All right. I think, oh, there was one final question from Mark Farrell, who wanted to know when we'll be meeting to take action on some or any of these ideas. And I think Sean kind of talked about it. I think Susan kind of talked about it. But collectively, can we say perhaps in the next like 2 weeks, we plan to get together to take some action on some items depending on the responses we get from HUD?
I think the stimulus money is just one component. I think there are certain areas that you could fast track it, if so be it. For example, the sidewalk cafe, if you would want to lift that permit in any way, you know, what would that look like? I think Mark brought up the suggestion, he'd like to see that expanded into other areas outside of his particular footprint. You know, if he had the adjacent property owners, you know, approval. So what does that look like? Is that something that we can do relatively quickly if that is something that businesses want, is for us to lift the sidewalk ordinance and or just portions of the sidewalk ordinance? So we can confer with our legal counsel. This may even be one of those items, I'm not sure. Sean, maybe you, as an attorney, you can also provide some input, but under the current declaration of disaster, what kind of latitude do we have that that we potentially don't have to go through a lot of formalities?
Right. Yeah, that's where when you started to mention that, that's where I was going to jump in. I think you know, there are going to be things that we cannot do without going through some formality, especially where it involves state agencies like PennDOT, if we're doing with those streets. Under the emergency declaration, I think we have a lot more flexibility and we can do things a little bit more on the fly. What I'd suggest we do is look over the next week very closely about maybe calling a special meeting within a week of today and putting a framework together where we can have more decisions made on the fly by staff with consultation, maybe with a subcommittee of council, or even where that's not necessarily not do that, because I think these businesses need quicker action on some of these things, and to continue to wait for you know, another council meeting a couple weeks from now, it's going to be difficult for some of them. So I think we need to get a plan in place over the next week, have a meeting in another week from today, and start to get some of that flexibility built into the system, both in permit processing, where maybe we need to suspend some processes, or when we're talking about opening outdoor spaces, you know, let's get those suspensions in place and give us some flexibility to move things along more quickly. And I'll say, because I don't want to prolong the meeting too much, but this has been a very restaurant-centered hour plus. For the most part, we haven't really heard a lot from the retail shops. We've had a few questions and comments. They have very different challenges, right? So restaurants can open up into outdoor spaces, and that's probably more acceptable and usable for their patrons, where retail shops, because of issues, you know, dealing with, you know, theft and other challenges, that's going to be a bigger difficulty for them. So I hope the retailers who may still be on this meeting, if you have questions or things in the queue that we haven't gotten to, please submit some comments on that and how we can be sure to help you out too.
And I will say that I was going to bring this up because this one question was asked twice, and I don't want to parse over or like go miss it. And it was about using the parks for commercial activity like yoga and exercise classes. And I know that that was actually in before this meeting. We had some ideas in council, and that was one that was floated as well. So I think that that's an opportunity. And the other thing that to Sean's point, for retail, I mean, ideally, if we have these corridors where, you know, restaurants are able to bring people out, I mean, to have retail businesses have some of their, I don't know, merchandise, even if it's not touchable. I mean, there's lots of questions about that, but, you know, making use of the fact that, you know, you have people and they don't have to go into your shop, and you can, you know, connect people to kind of like, you know, the old sidewalk sales. I've heard that people miss them. But yes, I don't know if we want to address the parks option because we haven't really talked about that, but we have internally at least floated it.
Yeah, we had that was, I think, Susan and Andrea, maybe you could address that. We were moving in that way. I think we were working on finalizing some agreements to make that happen.
Yeah,
You're correct.
that's correct.
How close are we on that?
We actually have the application revamped.
Okay, because I know I've received some emails, as you know, and we've gotten some comments today that, you know, I think people are ready to move forward with that as soon as possible.
Yeah, so go ahead, Andrea.
I was going to say, we have the park use agreement revamped, and really we just needed to be reviewed, and then we'd be ready to go. There'd be an application process. It would come to Parks and Rec, and then, you know, we'd have to approve it based on availability or whatever. But I think we have a good process in place.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We need to also, I think about how we're going to make sure everybody's aware of these programs, this and others. So encourage everybody to stay tuned on you know, borough's social media. Emails that you might receive from you know, business organizations like the chamber, and just stay tuned.
I think also I saw it on another municipality somewhere, that they did have a page that sort of just linked everything that was a quick resource guide. I mean, we can pull stuff in from the DCA too. It can be a link that links out, but some sort of one-stop shop. And then it can go into more information about the parks application and everything else, but something that, you know, these are things that we're, you know, frequently asked questions, the expectations that lots of people are going to need these, and sort of here's a bunch of the information all on one page. I think that'd be ideal.
Absolutely. You can never have too much information, especially about this. Thank you, everybody, for participating. It is now 9:43 a.m. The borough continues to monitor the COVID-19 situation, and we continue to provide guidance and assistance to all our local businesses and our residents in that space. We thank you for your time. And again, if we did not get to your question, please feel free to email the staff, and we'll make sure that your question gets answered. Anything else from council before we close it out? All right. Thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.